This is what we will be making for this month's tutorial. I'm a little behind this month. I usually like to get it up really early in the month for you, but as many of you know, we just moved from Charleston, South Carolina to just outside St. Louis in Illinois about a month ago. So I've been really busy unpacking and doing a bunch of DIYs and painting in our new house. So I am finally have my office settled so I can get back to a somewhat normal work schedule. So on the blog, you can find the color palette that we are working with, which is right here. I'm gonna set that as my default right now. We'll be working, but you can use any colors you want, of course, but if you wanna download this one, it is the Procreate formatted one. And as always, there is a reference sheet on the blog, just so you can kind of look at the project while we're working and follow along. The brushes that we are using are all from the Creativity Kit. I love this tutorial because it's super loose, fun, beginner friendly, or maybe just a nice break from trying to do so many technical things, and just a really creative overall vibe. So let's go ahead and get started. Instead of doing a lettering template for you to follow along with this time, I wanted to start from scratch and kind of show you my actual process for a piece like this. So I've got a square canvas here, but if you don't have one yet, just tap your plus sign and do a square canvas. If you don't already have any kind of square canvas set up, you tap this little button up here, and then you can add your own dimensions. I would recommend going like 2000 by 2000 pixels, or maybe 3000 by 3000. Usually if I'm just working for Instagram, I will do the sRGB color profile. If I know that I need to print this, or something like recently I showed you a book cover I designed, then I need to make sure that I am working in CMYK for printing purposes. But for today, I'm going to be using this 3000 by 3000 square, just RGB canvas. The first thing we want to do is create our sketch. So let's go ahead and tap layer 1 and rename it sketch to keep things organized. We are going to be working with Creativity Kit brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab the felt fine liner from the top and sketch with that. And let's grab our wrench tool here, tap canvas, turn on your drawing guide, click edit drawing guide, and take it all the way up just so we can kind of center things, and then click done. Now I am just gonna kind of sketch out Find the Fun, and I wanted to make this look a little puzzle-like. So I know that I'm gonna have find in the top third, and let's see, I want the F to kind of come over. So this can be really sketchy, this step. Really simple. And then I can kind of center that on that line. And you know what? I'm gonna actually do a new layer for each line of this Find the Fun phrase so that I can center everything before we get started. So I want to be the H to come underneath the top part of the T, and then I know that I'm gonna have, well, when I'm sketching this, I would probably just draw the E like that. And then you can kind of center it. Now, sometimes what looks best optically is not what is perfectly centered. So when all else fails, I go by what looks best optically. And to me, if I put that all the way where it should be, it doesn't look right optically. So I'm gonna leave it just a little off center. And then I'm gonna go ahead and write out fun. Again, we're just being really loose and sketchy. We're gonna have the U come under and up. And then when I was like sketching this part, I realized I want the last part of the N to come up over the E. So I could go back to my other layer and erase that out a little, and then kind of make sure fun is where I want it. And then to get all those layers down into sketch, I can just pinch them into one. And now I will center the whole thing and reduce the opacity so we have our sketch to work with. So again, it's really rough. It does not need to be even close to perfect at this point. So now we can turn off our drawing guide. You can always come back and turn it on later if you want to. It'll save the settings you used for this piece. But that is it for our super rough sketch. And I know I'm gonna end up having a heart here and adding some other elements, so I just kind of keep that in mind as I'm working, but I usually don't add those till later in the process because that just helps me fill the space of a lettering piece and balance things out. So that's our sketch. Next, we'll start inking. For inking your letters, let's start a new layer. Tap your plus sign, tap your layer, and rename it. Letters, again, I'm probably gonna do find on one layer, the on one layer, and fun on one layer. So I'll go ahead and write find on this one. And you'll notice on here, I labeled for you what brushes I was using. So for all these letters, I used the square chalk one right here. So I did it in rainbow color order. And if I make this bigger, you can see how much fun texture this brush has. And I want to be able to use it to make kind of square letters. So I'm going to play with it for a second and kind of decide how big I want my brush to be. So I'm right at about 22%. And again, my canvas is 3000 by 3000. And I think that looks pretty good. So I am going to just start inking my letters. I'm going to put my pen to the page and not lift it again until I'm totally done so that I don't get too much overlapping for this piece. What I mean by that is if you are working with brushes like this and then you go over, you can create layered looks, which is good for certain things. For this piece, I did not necessarily want that. But if you need to go over it again for any reason to create anything or fix it, that's fine too. All right, so I just kept switching colors here and inking all my letters in this nice textured kind of brush, but keeping them somewhat monoline. But again, it's a creative artsy piece. It does not need to be perfect. So I went through and did this for everything. So I'll speed that up in a second so you don't have to sit and watch, but I want to show you a few. So then again, because I have this on one layer, it's easy for me to adjust. I can always turn that drawing guide back on and move it around because now it's a little bigger that we've inked it. And if I, for example, say I don't think the eye is is positioned right where I want it, then I grab this little ribbon tool, make sure that you have freehand selected down here, and then you can just circle it and kind of tap it over, move it. I can click freeform and shorten it a little. So you can play with it and adjust it to get it just like you want it that way too. So I might just tap it a little more that way. And for now, that's good. So I'm gonna keep going with the rest of the letters in rainbow color order, and then we will come back and start working on the next steps. Now that I have everything inked out, because I have everything on its own layer, I can move things around a little bit. So I would need that to come up. It's a little too close to the now that we've thickened the letters a little bit. And the we kind of want to be right in the center here. So I'll align that. And then same thing for fun. Again, I'm going optically more than I am going perfectly with the lines. And again, you can always adjust it using freeform. And that's pretty good. So I'm just gonna go ahead and again, merge my layers down, and now I'll rename that lettering because that's my main lettering. And we can turn off our sketch. We don't really need it anymore. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my drawing guide again so I can kind of look at it without that distraction. And then you might notice, oh, well, I really think that this needs to be a little thicker. So you can either use your color selection tool, which is this little square, and drag it around, or you can go back to your color palette and grab the precise color. And I can always thicken that up a little bit. So yeah, that is gonna end up layering, which we weren't doing earlier, but that's okay because it's really a kind of abstract art inspired piece similar to last month. And if you want it brighter, one thing you can do is just swipe left and duplicate, and you can see how that makes it a little more opaque. And maybe you don't want it that much more opaque, then you can just tap the N and reduce the opacity, which brightens it a little without losing all that good texture. So if I do that, I then tap it and merge down, or you can pinch the layers down. So now we're going to Sorry, I keep clearing my throat. My allergies are killing me this spring. We are going to outline our letters next. So let's add a new layer and we'll rename this Outlines. And we are going to use the felt fine liner brush and just any color black. It could be straight black, almost black. And again, we'll test our size. I want it to be visible, but not too thick. I'm gonna go with around, that's like 38%. And now we're gonna be really, really loose with this. So, oops. I accidentally undid that, redo. I thought I had a mark on my iPad, but I just have a piece of dirt. Okay, so now we're just going to really loosely outline your letters. We don't want to be too far off, but there's no need for it to be perfect. So I'm just going to go through and outline everything. If there's anything I don't like how it comes out, oh, my iPad skipped a little right there, so I can 2-finger tap to undo and start over. And if it's not perfect there, that's okay, just zoom in. You can connect it and erase a little out. So go through your whole piece and do that. Actually, I'll keep working in real time and tell you about why I chose this phrase. So I've heard the phrase find the fun more than once, but I was recently working through a bar program, which is a workout that's ballet inspired. And she talks about the creator of the program. Her name is Elise, and she talks about finding the fun. So when you're doing something challenging that maybe wouldn't naturally be super fun, about finding ways to make it fun. And I actually talk to my kids about this a lot when they have to do their chores, like putting away their laundry or things that we don't traditionally find to be that fun. I tell them, put on your favorite music, and it makes things way more enjoyable. So that's why I chose this phrase. It's about finding the fun and sometimes dull or less than fun moments in life, which I kind of really like the idea of. All right, so we're almost done here, so I'll just keep this in real time real quick. So you can see that in a lot of my tutorials, I would use the straight line tool where you hold your pen down. It makes a perfect straight line. With this, I usually do not do that because we intentionally want it to look funky and not be too perfect. So I do not usually use those tools as much as I otherwise would in many of my pieces. If you have a line where you find, I just can't get that right, go ahead and use one of the straight lines. It's not gonna make a huge difference overall. Just try not to do too much of it or it'll look too perfect. Now we wanna offset that a little bit. So once you're done, just grab your arrow tool and we're just gonna drag it a little bit off center. So I just came, whoops, I thought I had all my notifications turned off, a little bit that way. And that is it for that section. So now we're gonna add some details on our letters, some little external details and background details to really help balance out our piece. Let's go ahead and add our background color so we can get a feel for adding other colors. So sometimes I add a new layer, drag it to the bottom and drag and drop my color, but for this piece, I'm just gonna tap background layer and then you can pick any color you want. You can play with lots of different colors. I went with that really light one, but you can do anything you want. It makes it easy to do that. Alternatively, you can add a layer, rename it background, and drag and drop colors. The reason I like to do that is because it's easy to play with opacity and do different things. But for this instance, I wasn't gonna mess with any of that. So it's fine to just use the background color option that's built in. Now we're gonna add some letter details. So tap to add a new layer and click rename, and I'm gonna call this letter details. And I am gonna grab a nice bright white and we're gonna start using some of the stamps here. So I'm gonna grab these stamped pluses and zoom in, way too big, reduce my size, test that out. And I know I'm gonna put like 3 here And then where else did I add some? You want to be a little, little random with them. If you want to adjust the angle, you can always grab your magic wand tool and adjust them. Now these are pretty light in opacity, so we will play with that once we get everything on. Next, I am going to use a few star stamps. Again, I need to test the size. That's actually pretty good. And you can put these wherever you want. You can do it exactly where I did. You can change it a bit, but I try to keep things pretty random and balance them out as I'm going. So next I did the stamped dot number 2 and decided I would fill in my H with dots. Oop, too close. Something like that. And then I just want to add a few dotted lines, but those will be more solid. So if you want to just brighten that stuff up again, just like we did earlier, you'll just duplicate and you can see how, can you see right there how that gets brighter in there? And then you can tap and merge down, and now we have it a little brighter. Now we're going to go back to our felt fine liner, and I added some dotted lines simply by drawing a straight line, taking my eraser tool and just erasing some segments at random. So I did that there. I decided to do that along the top of my F. Again, no rhyme or reason. I'm just being very random, but trying to kind of balance out my overall piece with where I am placing things. So that is it for letter details. You could add even more, you could add less, but because I'm gonna add background elements, I didn't want it to get too busy. So that is it for letter details, and next we will add our background elements. Once again, we will add a new layer, tap to rename it background details. And that we want behind everything. So I'm gonna grab it and bring it all the way to the bottom. First thing we'll do is our big heart. So I am going to use the stamped heart. And when I did this, I thought the heart is gonna go right here. So I have 2 blues over here. So it would be nice to balance that out on this side. So I grabbed the blue color again, and I am going to put my heart down and just adjust the angle and size a little bit with my arrow tool. Whoops, I wanna be on uniform this time. And rotate it if you need to. Okay, right about there. And we're gonna end up layering a lot of our background details, so we're gonna add some more layers temporarily. So I'm gonna add a new one, and we're gonna add this little stripe back here. So for that one, I used the oily pastel brush, and I didn't want this to compete too much. Like if I do that, it hides too much. So I added some pastel colors in here. So I used this kind of one that's a little darker than our background color so that it would be visible, but not overly so. And then I was just really random. You can play with it. It has a lot of fun texture, these brushes. And I used a lot of them to really make it look artsy. So depending on how much pressure you use, it will change. And it'll look different almost every time. So that one I did there, and then I used the rough edges brush to do like a little squiggle here. I want it to be a little bigger. Again, you might play with it a lot. I usually end up doing this more than is probably necessary. And I want that to be a little darker, so I'm gonna go over it just one more time. And then I use the round chalk brush, which is right here, and I use this lighter purple color. And I ended up using it at a really small size, but if you enlarge it, you can see the different textures. But for this, I really wanted it to be pretty small. And then I just did kind of a tighter scribble here. I might even go finer. Yep, I like that. Sometimes for me, the like little scribbles are the hardest part to get to look right. So I end up redoing them quite a bit. And again, you can always grab your magic wand tool here, select it and adjust the angle and position if you need to. So using lots of layers makes that easier for us to do. So I think those all look pretty good right there. So now I will merge the background details together. You have to rename it sometimes because it takes the name of whatever was on the bottom. And now we're going to add some more background details, but they're going to be layered on top of this. So I will just name it. You can name it whatever you want that helps you remember. So I'll just put another details there because I'll know that it's on top of the background details. First, I'm going to do some black and white ones. So let's go back to a black color. And I think when I originally did this piece, that's what I named it. I named one black details and then I named one colorful details. So what I did for this is just kind of a trio of dots here, and I made them different sizes. Again, pressure can adjust this too, but you can do it manually with the slider, something like that. And then I took the stamped plus and did the same thing down here, just very random. And if I want to adjust one, I can do that with the magic wand tool. And then to balance it out, I added 3 more pluses over here. And I also actually did the stamped circle down here in the N. Make that one even bigger. Okay, so I think that is all the black details. Now we're gonna add some colored details. So I'm gonna make a new layer and call that colorful details. And I'm gonna go back to that stamped plus and the bright pink. And again, these are just the colors I use. You can play around and do different colors that you like better. And then again, I used, I think this time I did that stamped dot one because I wanted that extra texture. If I stamp that really big, you can see how much texture that has. And then I did 3 dots here. And then I wanted to balance some color on the other side with that yellow orangey color. So I did 3 dots here. And then I also did one of the purple stamped pluses right about there. And then I'll use my magic wand tool to adjust that. And then if I want those to be brighter again, we swipe to duplicate, and you can tap the N to mess with the opacity to get it just like you want it, and then merge that down. And so I'm gonna rename this one so I don't forget. That's my black details. And go back to colorful details. I had one more stamp to balance out the green down here. All right, so that is pretty much it. Now, if you want to mess with the whole piece in its entirety, what you do is swipe right on every layer, and then you can move it around. You can make sure you're on uniform. You can resize it if you think it needs to be a little smaller. We can turn that drawing guide back on using the wrench panel and make sure it's fairly centered. And then again, I like to turn it back off and then kind of look at it optically and see if it looks centered to me. If it doesn't, then I'll adjust it just a little to what looks best to my eyes. And that's it for this piece. So you can do so many fun different things with this, and there's so many different textures. This kit is one of my go-to kits. It's one of my favorites, and I know a lot of you have already purchased it, so that's why I did another tutorial with this for this month. Oh, you know what? I left one thing out. There is a detail element I forgot. Go back to that felt fine liner and grab white. I did a dashed line on the heart as well. I'm gonna make that a little smaller this time. Oh, and here's an easy way to do this. Let's add a new layer. Do half our heart, erase out our little lines, and then swipe left, duplicate, and then just flip it and rotate it into place. And that just saves us a wee little bit of time and makes it a little more symmetrical. So that is it for this piece. I hope you had fun. If you post it on Instagram, tag me. I would love to see it. You can try different phrases, maybe do your name or a fun little logo. and I will see you again next month.